Yeah, South Carolina governor, his name is Henry McMaster. Governor McMaster is for this. South Carolina has given the green light for condemned prisoners in the state to be executed by a firing squad. Yeah, they're bringing back the firing squad. Final approval came after the State Department of Corrections said renovations had been completed on a new death chamber where the executions can take place in the state capital of Columbia. The electric chair is the state's primary method of execution. But a May 2020 law, this law was passed last year, now allows prisoners to choose to die by lethal injection or firing squad, the state said in a press release. Now I'm going somewhere with this. The new chamber, which cost $53,600 to build, consists of a metal chair with restraints that faces a wall. The wall has a rectangular opening where 3 shooters can carry out the sentence. Witnesses can watch the action behind bulletproof glass. Inmates will receive a hood and be allowed to make a final statement. They're not the only ones. Oklahoma, Mississippi, and Utah, they also allow for death by firing squad. Now let me remind you, at one time, the US Supreme Court said this was cruel and unusual punishment. It is now being brought back to state governments. The death penalty is a waste, a complete waste of taxpayer money, and has no public safety benefit whatsoever. The vast majority of law enforcement professionals surveyed agree that capital punishment does not deter crime, violent crime. A survey of police chiefs nationwide found that they rank the death penalty lowest among ways to reduce violent crime. Innocent people are too often sentenced to death. Since 1973, over 156 people have been released from death rows in 26 states because of innocence. They never did it. Nationally, at least 1 person is exonerated for every 10 that are executed. That's what we know about on the record. Now, let's go to the states. 10 out of the 12 states without capital punishment have homicide rates below the national average. So look at that. States that do not have a death penalty actually have lower homicide rates. The FBI data shows while half the states with the death penalty have homicide rates above the national average. In a state-by-state analysis, the Times found that during the last 20 years, the homicide rate in states with the death penalty has been 48% to 101% higher than states without the death penalty. Now, governments need to just say what it is. While governors will still tell you, oh, this is about deterring crime. This is about sending a message to would-be killers. So it justifies the state killing somebody. I'm anti-death penalty, by the way. But they use this false premise that does not bear out in the facts. If their premise was accurate, then states with death penalties would have a lower murder rate. They would have a lower capital murder ratio, but they don't. The reality is these things do not stop these extreme crimes, not at all. All right, Ben, thoughts here?
Yeah, there's 2 ways to go with this, right? First and foremost, there's a ton of innocent people that get wrapped up into this and unfortunately end up getting executed because while 1 in 10 people get exonerated nationally, there's a lot of people that are innocent that don't get exonerated because for whatever reason, their case just doesn't work out on appeal. But then there's also the cultural significance, which I think is really what the Republicans want here. The truth of the matter is we are seeing a escalating this rhetoric from a lot of Republicans right now. And amid that escalation, we are also seeing this push for things like firing squads. I feel like it's fundamentally impossible to disconnect those 2 things from each other. And I'm gonna go ahead on a limb and say that having something like a firing squad in your state, if anything, is gonna increase the murder rate. Because ultimately what it does is it propagates a culture of violence that deems some people unworthy of life. And by trying to deem people as unworthy of life, it gives tacit permission for people in the general public to decide within their own minds who is and is not a criminal. And that right there, that devaluing of human life, most definitely leads to a litany of different types of violence that we see, including things like hate crimes and domestic violence, etc.
And I want people to understand this. Just because the government says it's okay to do doesn't make it somehow okay to do. The government engages in premeditated homicide when they engage in the death penalty. That's what it is. Make no mistake about it. And once again, their entire premise rests on a lie. It does not stop these kinds of crimes from happening. And I believe personally, Ben, that life without the possibility of parole for individuals that deserve not to be on the street again. There are some people, they don't deserve to walk among us ever again. I believe that. I think having them locked up until they die inside of that jail of natural causes is a worse penalty than having the lethal injection or anything else. And governments, at some point, they gotta be honest. Why are they really doing it, man? Why do they really have the death penalty? It's for vengeance. It's vengeance, that's what it is. And they feel as if this settles the score, so to speak. But you have to be very careful. You cannot become the evil you wish to eradicate. If you're saying that murder is an evil, don't engage in murder to eradicate the evil you proclaim to step and stand against.